blues brought you in. Yeah. We started out, Jeffrey's like, where is everybody? Is the Renaissance Festival still going on?
Oh, yes.
But the blues brought you in, and it will bring in more as we go along. But the important thing is that you are here. And also we have a very special guest this morning, sitting center stage, who shall be introduced presently to you. But the series this month is Hidden in Plain Sight. It's about spirituality in daily life. Are you going to get our friend on camera?
I just did.
Okay. Everything we seek, spiritually speaking, is right here. It's already been furnished. That's the premise of this teaching. It's not in the next life or the life after that. Or it's not in some obscure, arcane kind of construct. It's right here at hand. And I was reminded of this in the middle. Stuff occurs to me in the middle of what I'd already prepared to say, and I just have to say it, which is why you get long talks sometimes. But anyway, at 9:30 it occurred to me, a teacher of mine was Dr. Fred Vogt. To many ministers of my generation, he was a great mentor, and he was a very funny guy and just a wonderful individual. And he had a saying. He had a number of them, but he had a point that he wanted to make in a lot of the talks that he gave. And at one point in time, when I was traveling a lot with this organization, I turned up at a lot of events where he was the keynoter, and he made this point to different groups of people, around the country. So I got to hear it a lot and his rationale for it. At the time, he was president of our organization. And the president then, maybe now, kind of they don't push people around, they don't make a lot of rules, but they kind of set a tone, a philosophical tone of their own preference, like the stuff to emphasize. Well, kind of like I do with you. I mean, there's a lot I could say, and you who attend here regularly hear sort of an emphasis from me on certain things, like this idea of practical spirituality. Well, Dr. Fred, when he was speaking at these times, he'd say, you know what kind of bothers me, he'd say, people come up to me and they'll say, Dr. Fred, I've heard all of the basics now. When are you going to get to the deep stuff? The deep stuff. And he said, there is nothing deeper than being accountable for your own life, taking responsibility. He said, I think by deep stuff, people mean walking through walls, manifesting, they call it precipitation, manifesting things out of thin air, like we're told Jesus fed the multitudes, In other words, theatrics, big, showy stuff. But all of that pales in comparison to being responsible for what you create in your own life. And it doesn't get any deeper than that, and also it never ends. It goes on for eternity. As long as we have existence, as long as you and I draw breath in one form or another, we'll be creating things and then being accountable for them. And then creating something else as a result of that. And that really is the point of this exercise. We're always co-creators. We're always participating with universal creative power to the level of our own understanding, manifesting things in our life. And that is the sacred process. That is the presence of what Rumi called the beloved. That's the presence of the beloved in our lives. And all of the good stuff that you've heard that you should be more of, like compassionate and authentic. That's the word now, authentic, being authentic. All of that comes as a result of the awareness of your participation in the creative process. A great way to be compassionate, people kind of look down their nose at this because it doesn't sound too saintly, but a great way to be compassionate is to realize that you're laying down karma for how people are going to treat you the next minute. And it's like, well, that's tawdry. I should be compassionate just because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, well, sometimes the right thing to do needs a bit of a boost, a bit of a help. Like gratitude, Well, I know I should be grateful, but a great way to motivate your own gratitude is to realize that in like capacity, to your own gratitude? Will the world be grateful for you? Forgiveness. I know God teaches, God is forgiveness, and all the great saints and avatars and messiahs and stuff have taught forgiveness. But the greatest motivation is not who all said it before, but that when you forgive, you are forgiven. Not by God. Leave God out of it. God never judged in the first place. That's just a parental figure that's used for crowd control. That idea that there's, really. I mean, that there's something looking down and, I wish you'd be moving you around, like pawns on a chessboard. No, instead, realize that to the degree that you forgive people, other people not only will people forgive you, but they won't hold stuff against you to start with. Have you ever had that happen where you're like, oh God, I've really offended somebody, and you finally work up the courage to go clean it up with them, and then you find out they didn't even hear what you said? They were distracted. Who's been carrying this? So the thing is, the great motivation for high spiritual conduct is the realization that we live in a reciprocal universe, and that what we give out, we get back. It all comes round. Scripture even says this, goes deep, that the wheel grinds exceedingly fine. What that meant is like in milling corn. Well, they didn't have corn in biblical times in that continent. It was over here. Did you know that? I didn't know that till recently. Corn was in South America, and so when you see sheaves of corn and stuff in European artwork, it's after there was some transaction between the continents. Anyhow, they ground wheat to make bread, to make many dishes, and grains would escape, and they'd fall down in the channels and the edges, And so the example was used amongst the ancients that no grain escapes the grinding wheel entirely and permanently. And hearing this, people were probably a bit panicked and went, oh my God, I'm going to be found out, and someone's going to grind me up. But if the grinding of you makes a meal, if it makes sustenance for the tribe, then is it a bad thing? It's like we were talking about in class the other day, this hysterical thing. If you go up to somebody and you say, I hope you get exactly what you deserve. Now, half of the people you say this to are kind of like, oh no. And the other half are like, all right, man, yeah, good. And so who's carrying what? All you've said is what you've said, But it's the guilty conscience or the clear that you're invoking. This is how we co-create. This is how we do it. This is how we co-create, is we participate in a reciprocal way in the universe. And an awareness that I had some years ago that really helped me was this. When I came into this teaching and learned about demonstration, learned about how you treat or pray or what have you, and you demonstrate, we call that's the word we use for an answer to prayer. There's a demonstration, a showing forth, literally, something. Well, this is what I learned. And so you go treat, you go demonstrate. See how you do. The awareness that I had some years ago, many years after that, a blinding flash of the obvious. You've probably thought of this yourself long before my telling you this, is that not only am I demonstrating, but so's the person I'm interacting with. And what they're demonstrating is me. They're demonstrating me being how I am with them. I am somebody else's demonstration all the time. Unless I completely hole up, and see no one. But even then, stuff is emanating out there. But certainly when I'm abroad in the world, I am the world's demonstration. So if I do something as kind of minimal, but good and kindly, as waving somebody ahead of me, there's this three-way stop near my house. Three-way stops are weird. People know better what to do at a four-way stop than they do at a three-way stop. And so there's this real kind of awkward, were you here first? And I want to be assertive, but at the same time, I want to do the right thing. I don't know, everybody runs through their whole psychological profile kind of in a three-way stop. You could write quite an interesting piece about this, but you wave somebody ahead of you. They created that kindness in their life, and you showed up to supply it. They believed on some level, down to what level of detail, we're never entirely sure, even with ourselves, but they believed on some level that they were going to have an easy drive to work today. And you got to support them in that. 2 weeks from yesterday, we'll be again giving out food at a local school campus to food insecure people in the neighborhood. And this is a great thing for us to do, and we're rightfully, justifiably proud of ourselves and each other for doing it, and the team that has organized it and so on. But here's the thing, those people who drive up and collect the food from us, they brought us out that morning. See, they called us out. They said, I'm going to have some food this week. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's coming. Somehow it's going to happen. And then some of us hear that call and throw in. This is how it works abroad in the world, everywhere. Everybody's demonstrating something. And what they're demonstrating is demonstrating that. So, looked at from a larger perspective, there really is no place where cause leaves off and effect begins. There's just first cause, causing. And every effect becomes a cause of a later effect, which therefore makes it a cause and not an effect. There really are no effects, because an effect sounds kind of final. You know, you have an idea, you get some wood and metal and stuff together, and you build a piano, and boom, there it is. There's the effect, and you can attach a price to it and so on. But once you got a piano, and once the thing's informed, now it's a vehicle for music to be played, and when the music's played, you're going to feel a certain way about it. You're going to carry that music with you out into the world, and it's going to cause you to think and feel and behave in certain ways, and maybe you're going to want to write a song yourself, and on and on and on and on. And that's just this piano, and that's just this thing and this thing and this thing. That's why we say it's hidden in plain sight. The potential of everything that thing could be is under the lid. You don't see it. It looks like it's just, well, I know what that is. I recognize that. But it's, you know, it's potential waiting to happen. Everything is potential waiting to happen. The sacred is right where we are. And it just takes a trick of the light to manifest it for us. It just takes a bit of imagination. Here's a way that imagination can work. I was reading the other day about a woman who attained her high school diploma against great odds. She had violence in her life. There were drugs around her. There was poverty. There was shame. And there was physical illness. There was really just about everything you could think of to throw at a person standing between her and that accomplishment. And yet she persevered with the help of others. But she did the persevering, and she attained her high school diploma. And she had that diploma framed and hung on her wall. And she looks at it every time she thinks there's something she can't do. She looks at that and she says, I did that. And as the months pass, the years pass, and the date on that diploma gets older and older, the energy of it will never get stale for her. I did that. I did that. There's a poem that I shared with you in full on a Wednesday night some time ago about a cathedral builder in the Middle Ages in Europe when they were putting up the Gothic cathedrals. And most of these were built over multiple generations, but there are a couple that were built in one. And this is a poem, it's fiction, you know, but it's set in Salisbury Cathedral. I think it was one that was built in one generation. And so it's set in that venue. And it's the grand opening. It's the dedication and the sanctification of the cathedral here 1,000 years ago. And the 1400. and the bishops and the cardinals, the heads of state. There's a parade heading into the cathedral, and a crowd of thousands assembled in the town square, and at the very back of the crowd, this man who is the voice of the poem. And he's old now, and his body is broken. His back is bent, his hands are gnarled, arthritic. His vision is not clear, his hearing is not sound. He's probably almost 60, given life expectancy and stuff. Plus, he was a cathedral builder. And up there on that parapet, under that gargoyle, are stones that he himself fit into place with his own hands. And he's telling this story. He says, so as I see this parade go by, he says, they don't know me. They don't know my name. I don't even have a name. I'm the son of somebody. I will live and die unknown. But I look up there, and I did that. That lintel piece under which they're all passing, I did that. That point of pride of what we've accomplished. Now you and I do have names. You and I do have way more sway in the world than the ancients and many cultures did. And still in all, think of how many people we touch and how we are the demonstrations for people. Think of the power of the word that you've spoken to a child at some point of encouragement and support. Your own child or someone else's. And that kid has gone on to do great things. Think of how you've given people a break from judgment, and so they've not had to labor under the weight of your judgment. And instead they've gone on and done great things because you didn't judge prematurely. How often do we do this? And Jeffrey here is going to speak a week from Wednesday, I think, on just that point. He's got an amazing, please come out and hear him on the 20th of the month, Wednesday night, Jeffrey Powell, because he's got a terrific prayer. I know what he's going to talk about because he wrote me an article about it, but it goes largely to that point that when you meet somebody, you don't know the backstory. But you can be part of the backstory. You can be part of the backstory for the next person that person meets, for how you send them on. It's kind of like that. It's like people come to you. It's like they're sent to you. And you interact with them in some way, and you send them on to the next person. Do you love this world? Do you love the people in it? Then send the people who come to you on to the next people they come to. Send them on healthy. Send them on with kindness. Send them on with a blessing. It's like, I don't know what you're up to. I don't know exactly what you mean by your life, but somebody will, and I support you in being you. See, we're universal, but we're not uniform. There's stuff that we like to do. This is what goes to the individuation of it all. There's stuff we do that nobody else does, that nobody else would want to. They wouldn't understand it. They do their own thing. There's stuff I don't understand that people do. I read an article the other day that said, here are the 10 things you need to do on your bucket list. I hate that expression, but I get what it means. Great movie. For the 10 things you should do. So I opened it. All right, well, let's see. Let's see if I've done them. First, I thought, I've probably done most of these things. I'm a man of the world, man. And then maybe there's some fun stuff in there I haven't thought of to do. All of this stuff on this particular list had to do with, shall we call it, altitude. That was one of them. You got to jump out of the plane. You got to bungee jump. You got to paraglide and parasail. And there was an explanation of the difference between paragliding and parasailing, which is one has rigid wings and the other one doesn't, and stuff. And I'm no. Oh, hell no. Rock climbing. And at that point I thought, The reason my species has evolved was so we didn't have to climb rocks. This is why we built roads and things, you know, down which you can, but people go out of their way to go find. There's a restaurant here in Spring, some of you may have been to, I've not been to it yet, but it's over, it's near the high school, and it's well regarded, and they have a rock climbing wall in there. Like before or after you eat, you can go climb this, or watch the other people climb. You see, I don't understand why people do these things, but I don't have to. Because I don't have to do these things. And I can be grateful that there's a breadth of human interest in these things. Because stuff that I do, people would probably find mostly boring. Except, you know, frankly, what I'm doing right now. Because a lot of humans find what I'm doing right now to be the most terrifying thing. They would rather climb walls, there's 1,000 things they'd rather do than be handed a microphone and be made to get up in front of a group of people and say some stuff. It's just one of those things. And so it's all about perspective, I guess. It's all about perspective. That you have your interests and you have your likes and your dislikes, and you never know what effect they're going to have. But last week I talked about keeping starlight in your pocket, which is a line from a Perry Como song. And I used it as a reference for pulling out a representation of your own sacred power, like a totem, like an icon, you know, that you keep close at hand. And you pull this thing out whenever you need to be reminded that you have access to this power, the same way the woman looks at her high school diploma and says, I did that. Therefore, I can do this next. Pull something out of your pocket, look at it, and be reminded of what you can do. Surround yourself with these sacred totems, the sacred icons. And so I brought for you today a guest who is a sacred totem icon in possession of this center. There are a number of its kin in a pile upstairs in the Heartfelt Living area, where the projects that the students have created over the years are kept. Projects that will be added to here in about an hour when we close this latest installment of Heartfelt Living with our final projects today, which is why there's some people here you usually only see at 9:30, but they're here at 11 because we're having class this afternoon. When this rock and its fellows were brought to the center, this passage came with it. So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people raised a great shout, and the wall fell down. Joshua 6:20. 30 years ago, yesterday, a great event occurred in the world, and it was memorialized by one of our people who at the time was stationed with the military, with the DOD in Germany. And she brought to us a number of pieces of the Berlin Wall. This is one of those pieces. If you were alive at that time, if you were a grown person and reading the news at that time, you know the impact that this had on the culture. If you're a newer human than that, let me point it out to you in the way that probably annoys you sometimes when older people tell you how it was. But at the end of World War II, when Germany was partitioned in half, it was more than just something that affected the German people. It was more than just communism versus capitalism or East-West or Iron Curtain or any of the rest of it. It was a scar, you know? And there are a number of them across human history. Well, this was one of them. And in 1989, a number of German people had enough. And they were like, we miss our cousins. Because families had been divided in this way. And President Reagan, who was a complicated individual, but President Reagan got up and he said, Mr. Gorbachev, who was then the premier of the Soviet Union, he said, Mr. Gorbachev, take down this wall. And And whether he expected he would or not, well, he did. Because it had to come from him in the Politburo and so forth. And things began to happen, and the wall came down, and we got a piece of it here. Now, the skeptic will say, is that signed and authentic? Does it come with a certificate? I mean, I can't tell you that. But I believe the lady who brought it all to us. I know she was in Germany for a fact, and I don't think she scooped this up out of the parking lot just to live because it didn't cost us anything. And usually if somebody's trying to flummox you, there's money attached, you know. Psst, hey, buddy, want a piece of the Berlin Wall? So this I think is the real deal. And even if it weren't, it's a good story, you've got to admit. But let's go ahead and assume that it is a piece of the Berlin Wall. And so you can look at that thing and you can say, when has change come? When has change come there? Other times too, but this one we've got on a little table down stage front, see? So it's like, yeah, I can do this. I did that. The old man at the back of the crowd looking at the cathedral, I did that. He physically participated. You and I didn't physically participate in this, unless one of us did. But psychic participation is as valuable as physical. We sent our etheric bodies there with sledgehammers. We did somehow participate in this because we believe people ought to be free. Because what we want more than anything else is to experience our own freedom. How can we experience our own freedom? How can you experience your own freedom if there's anybody not free on this planet? Well, you really can't. It's a very limited kind of freedom. It's a very tunnel vision kind of freedom that you have if anybody's still enslaved, if anybody's still bound, if anybody's still restricted in an unfair sort of way. And so we look at this and we say, yeah, we made a difference. So what I want to suggest for you is go out this week and consider yourself as the demonstration that other people are having. That you are responsible for your side of that transaction. Rather than just having it all be incoming and I want more prosperity, more harmony, more friends, more of this, more of that. You're setting yourself up for that when you become the place where that stuff turns around, like the trains turn around in the terminal station and head back the other way. Okay, stuff comes into you, it turns around, it goes back out. What are you sharing with the world? What kindness is what? If you can't do a physical act of kindness, if you're not there to take down the world, then what sort of psychic energy are you sending out of blessing and support and encouragement? Suppressing from time to time the critical instinct. Well, I don't like that, and I don't like this, and this, and we shut down and we get kind of angry and small, you know? But instead, it's like, oh, that's great. And if I don't understand this, somebody will. And if I don't see where this is going, I either will, or it'll go somewhere out of my field of vision, and that's okay too. But I trust this world, because I trust what created it. And I know that what created it never left it. But is ubiquitous in it at every point within itself. Right here, right now. Let's know together this one life, this one power, operating fluidly and easily through us, is doing exactly that which needs to be done. I find it easy to trust this life and the other godlings in it because I trust myself. And I choose to be a beneficial presence to all whose paths I cross. I cannot be responsible for other people's lives, but I can be responsible for what I bring to them. And so I bring kindness and respect and authenticity and compassion and humor and optimism. And if I don't know what to say, then I'll just sit with them like Job's friends when they finally ran out of unhelpful things to say. And they just sat with him and bore witness. And so, well, we'll wait for your outcomes here. whatever is called for in the moment is found somewhere in me to provide. I get out of my own way to let this happen. And I choose this week to work on the deep stuff, the deep metaphysics of being responsible for what I think, what I believe, what I speak, how I act. I choose to be responsible for my side of the equation, knowing that beyond my awareness is a power that is infinite in its scope, receiving and acting upon the impress I give it. And for that, the universe is responsible. One that is built to work. One in which I and all my fellow beings are free to thrive. For this knowing and the way it manifests in form, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
So it is.